Hi, Dr. Robert Silverman here, Amazon best-selling author of Inside Out Health and host of Proven Health Alternatives. I have got a great guest today, Dr. Peter Osborne. He is going to share a panacea of leading-edge information on why you not only need to be gluten-free, but totally gluten-free. He has a great book. I strongly recommend taking a look at it. That book is No Grain, No Pain. Here comes Dr. Peter Osborne, opening your eyes. Hey everybody, Dr. Rob here, Proven Health Alternatives. I've got superstar functional medicine doctor, Dr. Peter Osborne. How are you today?
I'm doing great. Thanks for having me on the show. It's my pleasure to be here with you.
It's my pleasure to have you. I've read your book. The book was fantastic. The No Grain, No Pain book. You're speaking to the masses when we talk about that. And I got to tell you, I want to read your bio so bad, but I got to ask you a question because every patient asks me this: really no grains? Really no gluten? Exactly.
Really.
Good. So I'm going to read this and you got to do me a favor. You got to answer that question first. Please do me a favor. So guys, let me tell you all about Dr. Peter Osborne, who is the clinical director of Origins Healthcare in Sugar Land, Texas. He's a world-renowned in the field of gluten and grain sensitivity. And without question, he's one of the most sought-after functional medicine docs in the country. He's the author of a highly acclaimed bestseller, as I said before, No Grain, No Pain. It was published by Simon & Schuster. Dr. Osborne is a doctor of chiropractic, let's go, board certified in clinical nutrition, pastoral medicine, and an advisor for the Functional Medicine University. He is, without question, passionate about educating patients and health professionals on healing through root cause resolution. He has been featured by Fox News, CBS, PBS, Huffington Post, Forbes, and many other nationally recognized events and publications. And I have personally seen him work, and he is without question an outstanding colleague and someone that I would turn to ask any question to. So here it is. Gluten, grains, really? No, even if I'm not celiac.
Well, so I stand by no grain. Predominantly, one of my credos is test, don't guess. So we could say that no one should ever eat grain, but I think, human biology is more advanced than that. It's more intelligent than that. I don't think we can make the claim that no grain for anyone ever. But I think if we're talking about somebody who's been dealing with chronic degenerative arthritis, chronic degenerative autoimmune disease, we've got to look at what grain can do to the gut. There certainly are a number of things in grain beyond gluten that can contribute to the problems. But grain-free is a great place to start if you're struggling with autoimmune disease, as opposed to just the traditional gluten-free diet, which is wheat, barley, and rye prohibitive. But I'm talking about corn. I'm talking about rice and millet and teff and sorghum and triticale and even the pseudo grains like buckwheat, amaranth, and quinoa. So, yeah, really no grain.
No grain. I love it. My patients come in and they go, really no grains, no gluten, and all that. Why no grains? I mean, everybody asks me, they have this idea that everybody's lived on grains, and we know the American society has eaten too many carbohydrates in grains. What would you tell everybody out there? Why no grain?
I mean, there are a lot of different reasons. One of the big reasons is gluten. Many people are gluten sensitive. It's estimated that anywhere between 10 and 30% of the population has gluten sensitivity. And that's what I was saying earlier, test, don't guess. I like to run genetic testing to determine whether or not a person has the genes they're going to predispose them to reacting to gluten. But then beyond that, let's just, move away from gluten and talk about grain in general. Grain is highly, highly, highly toxic in terms of a number of different substances. One is mycotoxin, which is a mold toxin, aflatoxin, and ochratoxin, and gliotoxin are known human carcinogens. They're known agents that damage the liver, that damage the kidneys, and grain is one of the largest staple crops that's where we find mycotoxins in high enough quantities to pose a health threat. And unfortunately, in the United States, we don't have really, really super strict standards on elimination of mycotoxins in our grain-based foods. So that's one reason, mycotoxins. Another reason is the carbohydrate. You mentioned earlier, carbohydrate toxicity. I mean, that's what diabetes is, really. If we really want to get down to it, it's carbohydrate toxicity. And when you're eating your staple diet is 60 to 80% carbohydrate, most of that being grain, you're not doing yourself any favors. So that the chronic and overload of carbohydrates is another reason why grain elimination is helpful for many people. But even beyond that, we've got other factors within grain, and one of those are a group of proteins that I call plant-centric proteins. Remember that grains are seeds, and the novel idea of a seed, or the general idea of a seed, is that the seed is designed to protect and preserve its own species, not to be your food. And so people don't think about food and the relationship that our guts have with our food. It's actually not a relationship of, oh, thank you for the nourishment. It's more of a relationship of, holy cow, you've just dumped all this stuff in me and I've got to figure out what's good and what's bad. So you're dumping in 80% seed, and those seeds contain proteins, chemicals, if you will, plant-based chemicals. And you probably use these a lot in your practice, like berberine, for example, is a chemical that acts as a natural antibiotic, right? And there are other ones like uva ursi, etc. And these plants contain these compounds, these plant-centric proteins like lectins, that basically are designed to hinder our digestion and to shut down our pancreas and to disrupt our bowel function. So you're eating these things as a staple in your diet on a daily basis. What you're doing is you're overloading your gut. You're giving it such a degree of burden. And that burden over time, your gut can't handle it. So it's going to crash. And it's that tipping point where people say, oh, I have leaky gut, or now I've developed autoimmune disease as a result of that. So a number of those proteins and families of proteins that are non-gluten-based proteins that we know can create gut inflammation and intestinal permeability, because that's what they're designed to do. They're designed to prevent predation or predators from eating them into extinction. And so we have to honor that, and we have to understand that. That's why so many people will soak their grains and sprout their grains, which is a step, generally speaking, in a better direction. But if you're gluten sensitive, soaking your grains isn't going to address the gluten. It's only going to address some of the other plant-centric proteins. Then we have, I can keep going. We've got the poor omega-6, omega-3 ratio. Grains are very, very high in omega-6. And omega-6 is an important and necessary fat. But when you eat too much of it consistently, it promotes inflammation. So if you've got mycotoxins and gluten, and you've got plant-centric proteins, and you've got excessive carbohydrates, all promoting inflammation, and that's your staple food in your diet, and you continue to keep it as such because you've heard the rhetoric about how whole grains are so wonderful and so healthy, and because you grew up with cartoon characters like Tony the Tiger and the Lucky Charms, Leprechaun and the little rabbit that's tricks are for kids, all that what I call propaganda, because it's not true nutritional science. It's more designed to market and sell and indoctrinate your children into believing they need whole grains to be able to maintain that healthy, successful lifestyle.
The reason I'm smiling and laughing is it's music to my ears. It's a mellifluous sound, if you will. It's great. I mean, it's like a lot of what I say to my patients, and a lot of people out there listening are going to be really excited. And you said a few great things. And by the way, we are not on the questions. We are just going for it. So here's what I want to ask you. You said whole grains. I know I saw you did a PBS. You gave a great fact. Could you share that fact with everybody in the PBS about the 30 whole grains?
About the 30 whole grains, which part are you referring to?
Out of the 30 whole grains, 8 were whole grains, and the other 22 were.
I'm not even sure. I'm not recalling what you're asking.
I saw one of your promos. It was great. You were talking about whole grains mean they're 30 grams and 8 out of the.
Grams.
Yeah.
I thought you said 8 grams, 20 or grains and 22 grains.
Yeah. I'm sorry. I confused you. I apologize. Yeah. It was grams. My mistake. My bad, as they say.
Yeah. So I mean, whole grains, in order to be classified as whole grains, don't have to be all whole grains. So you're not really eating 100% whole grain. That's kind of the myth. It has to be partially whole grain to be classified as whole grain. So they can still put processed grain. They can still add sugar. They can still add artificial colors, artificial flavors, and synthetic flavoring agents, and call it whole grain. And of course, whole grain is what we call in marketing, we call that window dressing, meaning that you put it on the label and everybody, instantly they recognize that in their own mind as, oh, that's healthier, or somehow that's health, kind of like low fat. And so you'll see low fat, or you'll see whole grain, or you'll see sugar free. Right. And people automatically, because marketing, they have this connotation in their brain that must be somehow healthier. Even the term gluten-free, which you see on a lot of labels, and you'll see like gluten-free rice crackers or gluten-free corn-based pastas, which aren't grain-free, and they're loaded with carbohydrates. They're not 100% whole grain, but they can be labeled whole grain anyway. And people look at that and they think, oh, because it's gluten-free and because it's whole grain, it must be better for me.
Right. So gluten and gluten-free labels me be something that people want to avoid. Your book's named No Grain, No Pain. So everybody knows the idea of functional medicine, or they're learning. The functional medicine approach to pain problems, how's it different than the conventional medicine out there today?
I mean, traditional medicine looks at pain as, and this is what's frustrating. You go into a hospital setting, or you go into even just a traditional allopathic clinic, and the first question, if it's a pain management clinic, the first question they ask is, give me a rating, rate your pain, right? 0 to 10. And then they give you some weird analogy like 10 is somebody slapping you in the head with a baseball bat, and 0 is no pain. Rate your pain between 0 and 10. First of all, it's a ridiculous question because people perceive pain differently, and people are on different relative scales of pain. So to ask that question to base any kind of clinical making decision is an absolute ludicrous thing. And that's one of the parts of allopathic, or we'll say traditional medicine as it relates to pain management, is they're more interested in how they can control your pain using a pharmaceutical manipulation, using a chemical to manipulate your pain level without actually resolving why the pain is there in the first place. So like, let's take, for example, an autoimmune pain disorder like rheumatoid arthritis, where somebody has an autoimmune attack against their own joints, and so their joints are being slowly destroyed by their own immune system. It can be an extremely painful disease. And so doctors oftentimes will control pain in this way. They'll use a steroid, which is an anti-inflammatory, or they'll use drugs like methotrexate, which was really originally designed as an anti-cancer drug, or they'll use other forms of non-steroidal anti-inflammatories to control the pain. But they don't ask the fundamental question, why do you have this pain? And that's what functional medicine asks. Functional medicine doesn't say that. Let me reframe that. Functional medicine doesn't seek out what we should call your disease so that then we can figure out what drug to give it. Functional medicine seeks out why your disease exists in the first place. It's infinitely more important to know why than to know what to call it. Because, you can take somebody with rheumatoid arthritis, for example, they go to a rheumatologist, they get the diagnosis, then they go see another rheumatologist and get a second opinion. And that other rheumatologist will say, oh, no, you don't have rheumatoid arthritis. It looks more like reactive arthritis. And then you get a third opinion, and that doctor will say, oh, no, really? It's not rheumatoid. It's not reactive. We're going to call this psoriatic arthritis. It looks more like psoriatic arthritis to me. What you choose to call it is mostly irrelevant. What causes it is where it's at. That's what we want to know, because if we know what causes it, for example, with autoimmune disease, there's 4 triggers. Simply put, these 4 triggers are food, chemical exposures, infectious microorganisms, and nutritional deficits. Those 4 trigger factors for most forms of autoimmune disease are present in large amounts for those individuals. And if you can discover those trigger factors for that person, and you can empower that person to make those changes in their lifestyle, for example, if they've got vitamin D deficiency and vitamin A deficiency and vitamin C deficiency combined with gluten sensitivity, and they're allergic to blueberries, right? Those are things that are easy for a person to be empowered to change. So as opposed to, here's this drug for the rest of your life. We don't really know why you have this disease. We don't really even know the mechanism of action of how this drug truly works. But clinical trials show that this drug helps to manage the pain that you have, albeit the side effects can be bone loss, muscle loss, cancer, diabetes, right? So these drugs that doctors traditionally use in medicine, and I'm not anti-medicine, by the way. I don't want to come across as the guy who's like, medicine is terrible and nobody should ever receive medicine. But it's for chronic degenerative disease, medicine has completely failed. And really, so when you ask the difference between functional medicine and allopathic or traditional medicine, the real true difference is in chronic degenerative disease, we seek out the origin of why the problem exists, and we empower the patients to try to make changes in their diet and their lifestyles so that the disease itself, the disease process, is mitigated without the need for artificial manipulation of their chemistry through pharmaceuticals.
I love the answer. You wrote an entire book. I wrote some notes here. No grain, no pain. Clearly a bold statement. Love it. Now, we talked a little bit about it. Did you mean no grain, or are you referring to gluten specifically? I think you touched upon it, but if you could just expand on that just a little bit and make sure that's clear for everybody.
So the connotation of no grain, no pain versus no gluten, no pain, I mean, there's a very clear distinction. And first, I'll make a definitional difference for people who maybe haven't heard this before. When we say gluten, in medicine, generally speaking, gluten is defined not as gluten, but as a subprotein called alpha gliadin, which is a type of gluten found in wheat, barley, and rye. So when somebody says, "Hey, it's gluten free," what they really mean is it's alpha gliadin free, right? Kind of a nerdy way of going about it, and stick with me because I know that science can kind of be boring and like put people to sleep, but it's very important that your audience understands that alpha gliadin is one type of gluten. We know of today, just as an example, in 2010, a group of researchers in Australia discovered 400 forms of gluten that we didn't even know existed yet. And 40 of them were more toxic than alpha gliadin. And those 40 different glutens are not just specific to wheat, barley, and rye. We've got gluten in corn. There's forms of gluten in rice and in sorghum and in millet. So these classic gluten-free grains that are being called gluten-free are not really truly gluten-free. They're alpha gliadin-free. That's it. So there's no such, bottom line is this, there's no such thing as a gluten-free grain. All grains have different forms of gluten, period. We can't argue that point because what is gluten? Gluten is a family of proteins. It's not a singular protein. It's not a singular structure. It's a family of proteins found in the seeds of grass. Well, that's what grain is. Grain is the seed of grass. So if you eat the seed of grass, doesn't matter whether it says it's gluten-free or not, you're actually getting a form of gluten. And for many people, those other forms of gluten are just as toxic and just as inflammatory.
So no gluten, no grains.
Yes.
Not necessarily in the order. No gluten, no grains. Okay.
So a better way to say it would instead, to me, would be, we call it in our culture, in our that gluten-free society where I kind of hang out, right? We call it a true gluten-free diet versus a traditional gluten-free diet, because a traditional gluten-free diet is only in reference to alpha gliadin, wheat, barley, and rye. A true gluten-free diet is in reference to all forms of gluten, meaning no grain.
Outstanding. Thank you. Gluten aside, can you talk about some of the problems eating grain? And the big thing is, more so than the problems, and you mentioned it before, but can you give 3 to 5 reasons why a grain will cause inflammation? People don't understand that food is the potentiator for inflammation.
Yeah, absolutely. I mentioned before, one is the omega-6 fatty acid ratio. It's extremely high and problematic in that the omega-6 level quantity in grain versus the omega-3 quantity is the opposite of what humans evolved on. We evolved on a 2-to-1 ratio, meaning 2-to-1 omega-6 to omega-3. Well, most of your grains are astronomically higher than that ratio. When I test people all the time for their omega-3 status, for their ratios, a lot of them are at 20-to-1, 20 omega-6 to 1 omega-3. And that sets the stage for chronic pain because, you know, again, omega-6 excites the inflammatory cascade. And it doesn't mean omega-6 is bad. I also don't want your audience to think omega-6 is evil. It's kind of like cholesterol. Cholesterol is not evil, right? We don't want people to think it's bad. We don't want people to just avoid omega-6, but we also don't want them to have such an imbalance in their diet that's promoting of inflammation. One of the other factors, we didn't mention it earlier, but I think it bears discussing, is the pesticide use. Mm-hmm. We've got glyphosate is for wheat, for example. Wheat is not a genetically modified crop. It's kind of a misnomer, a misconception out there. Now, corn is genetically modified, meaning we've altered the DNA with corn, and we grow types of corn that can produce their own pesticide, types of corn that are weed resistant, and types of corn that basically, when you spray glyphosate on the ground, everything dies but the corn, right? That's genetic manipulation or genetic modification. But wheat is not genetically modified. Now, wheat has been hybridized, meaning we've taken certain strains and we've combined them together, but we haven't actually gone in and spliced the genes to create a, kind of a Frankenwheat, so to speak. But what happens in farming today is, to prep the field, they're spraying glyphosate. Then before harvest, they're spraying glyphosate again. So your wheat crop gets a double dose of glyphosate before it's actually harvested, because the glyphosate before harvest dries the grain out so that it can be combined a lot easier and a lot faster. So for farming, it allows them to grow more faster, and have an easier process in the harvest itself. And that glyphosate is a known chelating agent, and it's also a known antibiotic. So it destroys the gut microbiome. It binds to minerals like selenium, which can create thyroid problems, and it can create chronic pain problems, because selenium is very important for metabolism. And when you slow down selenium, you slow down your metabolism, you can actually experience chronic muscle inflammation. And so a lot of people from glyphosate have extensive problems as a result of that. So Glyphosate is one, but other grains are grown with atrazine, which is another herbicide that it acts as an artificial estrogen. So if you're a man, it puts you in a state of estrogen testosterone imbalance. If you're a female, it puts you in a state of estrogen dominance. And of course, heart disease and cancer are diseases that have been linked to estrogen dominance. So grain can do that as well. So you've got to be concerned about the pesticide. And some people will say, well, I buy organic grain. And that's where we go into, besides the gluten, even organic grain contains those plant sensory proteins. It contains mycotoxins. It contains high levels of omega-6. So we're still dealing with some of the same elements with grain, even though it might be organic. And then one of the other things that I'll briefly mention is the processing of grain. A lot of your flours are brominated, meaning they take a compound called bromine and they add bromine to that because bromine's a dough conditioner. It makes it chewier. It makes the flour chewier and gooier. So palatability, it basically makes the grain more palatable. And so a lot of people don't realize that bromine it's what we call a halide, which is a class of element that competes with iodine absorption. It's also a toxin. So it can create and contribute to a whole host of other different kinds of health issues, but predominantly it interferes with thyroid function because it interferes with iodine absorption into the thyroid. So people can become hypothyroid as a result of mass bromine exposure.
Outstanding. That's a really informative answer. That cleared up a lot of questions for my audience. Wrote a big question down for you. You refer to a concept called the prescription pad trap in your book, No Grain, No Pain. Let's look at a common scenario. I'm going to hit you with this. A patient with chronic pain issues has been prescribed multiple medications to reduce their pain. It's one of the most common things that we see in America. What can they do to break the trap?
I think first, understand that so let's use the example. Okay, so you've been prescribed drugs. So let's classify those. So there's opiates, there's non-steroidal anti-inflammatories, there are steroid-based medications. These are kind of some of your more common pain-controlling drugs, right? And so if we're talking about opiates, which are highly addictive, opiates will slow the mind down. Opiates will fatigue a person. Opiates will cause constipation, which can lead to intestinal permeability and leaky gut problems. So that's part of the problem with the pain medication is it creates a subsequent set of problems that create pain. We look at steroids. Steroids cause calcium, magnesium, and vitamin D deficiency. And it's well known that steroids, actually chronic use of steroids causes muscle atrophy. So let's take that person who's in pain, right? Their back hurts. And they're taking a steroid to control that pain. That steroid's causing their back muscles to atrophy. So when the muscles atrophy, what do? They shorten. So now the joints, as a chiropractor, right, we adjust the spine, and those joints are now under tighter burden and tighter load because those muscles have atrophy. So there's more pressure on the disc, more pressure on the nerves coming out of the foramen from the spinal column. And so now you add from a pain perspective, you take an inflammatory pain and now you add a physical type of pain, which can be caused by that disc compression, can be caused by that neurological compression. So now you've got neurological pain and they want to put you on Lyrica. And Lyrica also causes constipation, which can lead to leaky gut, but it can also cause vitamin B deficiency. And vitamin B deficiency causes fatigue. And when a person's super tired, they don't want to exercise. And when they don't exercise, they can have muscle atrophy because of disuse, right? So now this is the trap, right? So just kind of painting the picture of what the trap actually looks like. The way you avoid the trap, the way you get out of the trap is first you evaluate where the pain is coming from. My advice to anybody that's suffering chronic pain and under pain management is instead of having your pain managed, get with a functional medicine practitioner who will look for the reason that you have the pain in the first place. And it could be multifactorial. You could have pain because of a herniated disc, because of an impinged nerve root. You could have pain because of an autoimmune response in your muscles or in your cartilage. A good functional medicine practitioner is going to help you run the right types of tests to help you identify where those things are coming from. Because to really fully escape the pain trap, you've got to understand the origin of the pain. Once you understand the origin, and if that origin is grain, if it's food, you can remove that from the diet and the inflammation reduces, and then the need to block inflammation by using drugs also reduces. So now that person is able to taper off of that medication, if that makes sense. So, I mean, other things can be done too. High doses of fish oil can be very effective in patients that are struggling with chronic pain. Turmeric can be a very effective anti-inflammatory. My favorite combination is high doses of vitamin C, 5+ grams a day, combined with high doses of quercetin. several grams a day, because together, when you use those together, they have a very, very potent anti-inflammatory effect that can rival, in my experience, can rival the potency of a steroid. So we actually use that sometimes when patients are trying to work with their rheumatologist to get off of their steroid, for example. We'll use high doses of vitamin C, high doses of quercetin as a kind of a steroid bridge, if you will, to kind of move them away so that they don't have pain flares while they're trying to titrate their doses down.
That's outstanding. You know, it's real funny. I think that your prescription pain trap, when you explain it, you're really saying you're going to get to root cause resolution. And again, you had mentioned that that is the crux, the backbone of functional medicine. I got a couple more questions I wanted to ask you. So everybody's freaking out right now because they're like, wait a minute, I can't eat gluten. I can't eat grains. You and I both know that. They're going to say it's, you know, what's for dinner? So give me a dinner that they can have tonight, a generic dinner, something healthy.
Okay. How about roast beef? You know, a nice grass-fed roast in the oven with some slow-cooked carrots and some bone broth as your medium to put it in and bake it in, right? Simmer it really, really long so it's nice and tender. And you can add any other vegetables you like to that. You know, I like cauliflower myself. I like Brussels sprouts. I like searing the Brussels sprouts in a little bit of lemon juice and olive oil. It gives them a really good flavor. So there's no shortage of what people can eat. Understand that most people think that their diet has variety with grain, and realize that a lot of the foods like pizza and sandwiches and pasta and cereal, those are all just different shapes of grain, or grain produced in different ways. That's not variety. Where you see what I'm saying? Like, you're eating the same thing, you're just eating it mashed into different forms. True variety is you've got an infinite, well, not an infinite, but you've got a vast quantity of different animals that can be consumed, unless you're a vegetarian, right? But if you're not a vegetarian, you know, you've got beef, you've got chicken, you've got duck, you've got goose, you've got quail, you've got pheasant, you've got wild game like elk if you're a hunter, and you've got deer in the freezer. You can eat deer sausage. So there's just a lot of different variety from a meat perspective. And then from a vegetable perspective, there are 300 different varieties. You know, in different seasons, there are different availabilities. My advice is eat with the season. Don't worry about rotating your diet dramatically. Eat with the season. When blueberries are in season in the summer, eat them. And then when they're not in season, don't worry about eating them. Switch to something different, like your seasonal squashes, etc. Or apples that come in the winter, or cherries that come in the winter, right? Or pecans that come in the winter. You've got so much different seasonal availability and variety. There are hundreds of different options. Most people have never explored those options. They've been confined to the social paradigm that if we compress grain in this form, that form, this form, that form, and this form, then that's variety, right? And so their mindset is that that's what they should be eating because they've been told that grain is super healthy, and they've veered away from the vegetables and the fruits. And the key is here, because a lot of people are like, well, yeah, you're right. What do I eat? This is a learning curve. This is a learning curve. If you want to change your diet and change your life for the better, learn how to cook. Learn how to prepare vegetables differently. Don't just eat raw broccoli. That's horrible, right? Nobody's going to just enjoy raw broccoli. You know, learn how to use herbs and spices. Learn how to cook with oils. Learn how to saute. Learn how to simmer. Learn how to steam. Right? There's all these different options and all these different ways that you can really prepare a meal. And if you don't have personal time to do it yourself, look, honor yourself first. And what I mean by that, love yourself, right? You should love yourself. Your health should be the top priority. And when I hear people say, well, I don't have the money to do that, they've got bad priorities. That's not a health problem that they have. They have a priority issue, because you have to prioritize loving yourself first, taking care of yourself, because health is wealth. You're not going to go out there and earn a living if you're in chronic pain all the time. So you want to make sure that you're either learning these things so that you can take care of yourself, or you're paying somebody, right? Paying somebody to cook your meals for you. Or if you're married and you have a spouse, that you're working together to co-create different things, because especially if you are in a two-income family where both people are working, you get home at the end of the day, you don't want to spend 2 hours preparing a gourmet meal if you're tired, right? But part of the problem is you're tired because you're not spending that time preparing real food, and you're ordering in pizza, or you're doing something along those lines. So you really have to wrap your mind around the commitment that loving yourself first is important, and that when you love yourself, you're not going to choose something that's not unhealthy for you to put in this machine, right? You're going to choose something that's very, very healthy. So you're going to commit the time where it needs to be committed. And that means committing more time to the kitchen, as opposed to handing over that responsibility to McDonald's or to Burger King, right? Because they don't care about your health. right? The cereal companies don't care about your health. And so if you give them that responsibility, what you're going to reap from that is poor health, because that's not the business they're in. They're in the business to sell you more product. They're not in the business to make you healthy. And you have to be in the business of loving yourself enough to care enough to learn how to cook, to learn how to prepare things differently, and to expand your horizons and expand your mind so that you can eat well, because when you eat well, you live well.
Absolutely. That was great. The reason I smile is when you say these things, I hear all the patient noises in my head and I start laughing because I kind of want to call you on the phone so we can get like a stereo going with all the different things. There's a cornucopia of food to choose from. It's so funny. Like, what do I eat? Well, obviously everything that you've been eating isn't working. That's why you're here. Sandwiches, other than in America, who really has a sandwich? I mean, all the things that you mentioned, outstanding. I have one more big question for you. I need you to give me a breakdown of what every chronic pain sufferer should do to defeat their pain once and for all. Get rid of it.
So yeah, breakdown. So number one is look at your lifestyle. Okay. There's several different factors that you need to make sure that you're doing. I call them the 7 fundamentals of life, right? In order to maintain good health. And if you're sick, in order to restore good health. Fundamental number one is the food that you eat. So eating real food is a good place to start. Like not packaged, not processed, but just real food. So eat real food, right? That's number one. Number two, sunshine daily. Now, sometimes you're in a more northerly climate, so that can be hard if there's a snowstorm or if it's, raining for, 20 days out of a month. But as often as you can, when the weather permits, you should be getting sunshine as frequently as you can. The dermatologists have scared everybody out of the sun. We need sunshine for vitamin D. We need it for melatonin. We need it for proper sleep. We need it to fight cancer. Sunshine is a nutrient, and we don't get sunshine from eating. We get sunshine from exposure. So get out there and get exposure to the sun on a regular basis. The difference between increasing your risk for cancer and not is when you sunburn. Don't go out long enough to burn. Go out long enough to get adequate exposure. For most people, 20 to 30 minutes. So, but it's a critical element, and it's a fundamental. Lack of sunshine will cause disease, period. So get sunshine every day or as often as the weather permits. Number three, sleep. Sleep is crucial. And if you're going to bed at midnight, you're not doing all that you can to get your sleep dialed in. You heal between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. So your body registers, your brain registers, and there's a hormonal shift and a hormonal change that allows your body to heal and repair itself at night between the hours of 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. So you want to honor that time frame. Get to bed and be asleep before 10, and obviously sleep longer than 2 a.m. But sleep through that window to maximize your capacity for good health and healing. So good sleep. What number am I at? I'm at 1, 2, 3. We said food. We said sleep. We said sunshine. Number 4 is exercise. Move your body. It's 70% water, and a stagnant field of water starts to stagnate. It starts to become infected. So you remember, you have to move your body. It's how your lymphatic system works. It's how you detox. And if you're not moving and you sit at a desk all day for 8 hours, and then you go home and you sleep for 8 hours, that's 2/3 of your day and night where you're not even moving. And so you want to make sure you're getting adequate and ample movement. 10,000 steps a day is a simple place to start. You don't have to go join a CrossFit gym. You don't have to, you don't have to go lift 1,000 pounds. We just need good, steady, consistent movement. So movement is critical, and it's a fundamental for a good health. Number 5 is clean air. So if you don't already, if you live in a municipal area where there's a lot of pollution, filter your air in your home. Simple. Buy a HEPA filter, put it in your home. You can buy these things easy. You can buy them over the counter at the grocery store. The next one is clean water. Filter your water. Here in Houston, where I live, there's 42 prescription drugs that we found in the drinking water when we analyze it. 42 prescription drugs, right? Now, they'll tell you, oh, it's not in a high enough amount to do anything. But when you put 42 drugs in a cocktail together, there's a law of synergism with chemistry. And that when you give 2 or more things, they ramp up the way that they work. So we know it's a problem. So filter your water. I like reverse osmosis because it pulls all that garbage out. Whereas if you're just using carbon's good to pull out chlorine, but it's not pulling out a lot of the other toxins and a lot of the other chemicals. So get a good reverse osmosis filter and drink clean water. And then the last thing is control and manage your stress. Like ideally, you want to have balance in your life. And some people don't have balance. They go to work at a job they hate, then they come home to a relationship they hate. That's not balance. So surround yourself with positive people, right? And and that doesn't mean if you've got a family member you don't get along with that you can never visit your family. but it just means to limit your exposures to things that really stress you out to the nth degree. So, know where that line is and know where that balance is. So stress management becomes very, very important. So you can do things like prayer. You can do things like meditation. I like float tanks for stress management. Which, what a float tank is, right? I mean, I'm sure you probably do, but your audience may not know. It's a big, big salt bath, right? It's 1,000 pounds of magnesium poured into a bathtub, and you just lay and you float and you're horizontal for a good hour, and all that magnesium soaks into your skin, and it just calms and it just relaxes you. It's a great way. It's a great therapeutic way to relax. Beyond that, get with a functional medicine doctor. If you're struggling with a chronic health issue, look, this is not the time for do-it-yourself. This is not the time. This is not Home Depot, I'm going to build my fence, right, instead of hiring a contractor. This is your health we're talking about. And unless you went to school for 12 years to learn about functional medicine and biochemistry and pathology and pathophysiology, get with an expert. Hire an expert to help you navigate those waters, because a lot of what you don't know about the food or about the environment is what's keeping you sick. And the perfect example, I see this all the time, when I test my clientele, when they come in, I test them for allergies to foods and chemicals. And a lot of times, what do we see? We see they're allergic to things like blueberries or cauliflower or broccoli, right? And so now we're telling them to eat healthy, real food, but if they're allergic to that healthy, real food, then it's still part of their problem. So we want to know, we want to be able to measure. So test, don't guess. And when you're running the right test, you're working with a professional who can help you understand what are the right tests to run, so that you can identify what your unique biological blueprint needs to be as it relates to your food and your behavior. And so again, you can apply those first 7 things. Everybody can apply. Those are common sense. But the last part isn't common sense. It's implementing the brain power of somebody who's trained in functional medicine, and it's implementing the arsenal of tools and technology that they have available for you to use, so that you can get to the bottom of why you might be suffering with a chronic illness.
Outstanding. Those big 7 are fantastic. Magnificent 7, if you will. Your book is No Grain, No Pain. How can they get it?
Amazon, Barnes & Noble. They can go to nograinnopaybook.com. And we have a special bonus set up. So if you go through our website and give us your receipt, so maybe you've even already bought the book, come give us your receipt. When you give us your receipt, we're going to send you a bunch of free coupons for grain-free products, things that you can buy that are actually healthy, but we'll also send you a leaky guide or a leaky gut guide. It's about a 70-page guide on navigating leaky gut so that you can get educated.
Outstanding. Doc, it's been great. Any parting words you want to give the audience?
I just got to say, if you're struggling, really honestly, work with a professional. I get it all the time, and I'm sure you do too, Doc, and that's people come in and they waited 5 years too long. They struggled with an illness, stoically tried to push through it. They thought their willpower was strong enough to get them through it. And 5 years of damage goes by. 5 years later, now we've got a bigger problem than what we had before. And if you let it go too far, it can take years to recover instead of months. So I would just highly encourage any of you that are listening that are struggling, get with a good functional medicine doc. If you're near Dr. Silverman, get with him. If you're near me, get with me. If you're near others, get with them. Just get with somebody who's an expert who can help you.
That's outstanding. Look, we got to have you on again. That was great. I got a ton of questions. I'm going to talk to you when we're done. Dr. Peter Osborne, Proven Health Alternatives. Dr. Rob, always yours in health.